letting you guys know, letting the reader know from Nehemiah and from the Chronicles what happened when they came back and how they spread out and how their land was allotted to them. Hey, everybody, welcome back or welcome for the first time to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I am reading through the Bible in 365 days using the chronological Bible reading plan from oneyearbibleonline.com. And that would be, you would go in there, you would download the free chronological Bible reading plan, use your own Bible to read along with me. So today we are on day 265, which means we are 100 days away from the finish. We've done 265. We've got 100 left. It is September 21st, and our reading today is Nehemiah 11 through 12:26 and First Chronicles 9, 1 through 34. And much like the promise I've made every day for a week and haven't followed through on, this is not going to be a long video because not a lot is happening. So for anyone who has been here before, you're going to skip past 2 minutes. If you have never been here before, I do a very brief history of where we've come from, because I don't think you can understand where we are until we've been somewhere, right? So like, you don't want to land in 2024 and from a bazillion years ago. You're going to have no idea what's happening at this day and in this age. So I'm going to give you a brief history. So for those of you who have been here, fast forward to about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and I'm going to be back and be in the reading. All right. So we are in the nation of Israel. So the nation of Israel has started like this. There were two people, and they were created by the maker of the universe. The Lord created everything. He is a being with no beginning and no end. So he started before we ever existed, and he will continue long after humans exist in their human form. And so he created this world and this galaxy and this universe and this entire system. And in that system, he created all of the animals and the people. He gave the people a command, and he said, don't break this command. If you do, you're going to die. And so what's going to happen is essentially you will not live forever with me. You will perish, your body will perish, and your lives will perish. And unfortunately they did. They were tempted, and in that temptation they failed. And so they severed in some ways their full, complete relationship with the Lord. And ever since that time, the Lord has been working to draw the human race back into relationship with him. And so he set up this entire plan in which he was going to draw the humans back into relationship with him. And so now we find ourselves, it was the time of Adam and Eve, and then people grew, and then it was the time of Noah, where he sort of took out most of the world and just left that small little family, and then they repopulated. And then after they repopulated, he found a descendant of Shem, of Noah, and his name was Abram. And he chose Abram to go into a land that wasn't his own, and he promised him, made a covenant with him because of his faithfulness, and he promised him that his future people would be descendants all over the earth. They would be like sand. And they would be everywhere, and they would be in relationship with the Lord. And then from there was a covenant with Isaac, his son, and a covenant with Jacob, and then a covenant with the 12 tribes of Israel, which were taken over by the nation of Egypt for hundreds of years. They cried out to the Lord. And then the Lord responded by saving them, right? So being their salvation, and bringing them from there back into the land of Israel, the land of Canaan at the time. And then once again, they started breaking away from the Lord. And then the Lord would send people to save them and bring them back. And they still kept breaking covenant. And then these major nations, Babylon and Assyria, came in, wiped them out almost, but not completely, almost. And there was a small remnant left. They were taken into Babylon, and they were sort of spread all over. And then after 70 years, they cried out once again to the Lord, and the Lord brought them back into the nation of Israel. They built up the temple, and at this time they are building up like the surrounding walls of Jerusalem, which is their nation. And so that's where we are right now. And it's about 100 years after they have come back from the nation of Babylon. So this is where we find them. Nehemiah is one of the guys who Well, he didn't actually bring them back. Others brought them back. But then he was one of the sort of second or third generation that came because he had heard they weren't following the Lord and he wanted to go help them out. So he came here sort of as a leader, like in some ways rebuking them and telling them that these were the things that they needed to do. And he brought reinforcements and helped to build them up. That is where we find ourselves. And so the wall has been built. They started some of their celebrations, and now we find ourselves where they're going to spread out some of the land. So it says, now the leaders of the people, this is Nehemiah 11, sorry. Now the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots to bring one out of every 10 of them to live in Jerusalem. So not everyone was going to live in Jerusalem. It was a small nation, so not everyone was going to live there. So there were people, Israelites, the Hebrews, the Jewish community that was living outside of the walls of Jerusalem, but some were living inside the walls of Jerusalem. And it wasn't just the Levites and the priests, and it wasn't just the leaders, it was other people as well. And so they were living inside the nation of Jerusalem. And it said, then these are the provincial leaders who settled in Jerusalem. Now some Israelites, priests, Levites, temple servants, and descendants of Solomon's servants lived in the towns of Judah, each on their own property in the various towns. So some lived in Judah, some lived in Jerusalem was in Judah, and some lived in Jerusalem, and some just lived in the nation of Judah. I looked at this because I saw Zechariah, and so I messed up Zechariah with Judah. So it says, Athaiah, son of Uzziah, the son of Zechariah, the son of Amariah, the son of Sheptiah, goes on and on and on. These were the descendants of Perez, which we saw way back in the time of Ruth. These people settled in Jerusalem. And then there are some that are the descendants of Benjamin. And so we see 928 men. One of the people that we see is Joel, or Joel, I don't care how you want to pronounce it, son of Zikri, was their chief officer. This could be the Joel that we hear from in just a little bit. He could be one of the prophets. From the priests, we see a lot of these names. Sariah, Meshullam, the son of Zadok. And there were 822 men of these, and then we see more. So it just lists a lot of the people that are coming in and staying in the nation. And then it has the gatekeepers. And I just want to go over what a gatekeeper is, because this is, in some ways it's repetitive, right? So it does Nehemiah, and then it also does First Chronicles. It actually goes all the way back to First Chronicles, and it shows some of that. But First Chronicles lets us know a little bit more about the gatekeepers. So I want to go into that. It says in First Chronicles 9:22, it said those chosen to be gatekeepers at the thresholds numbered 212. They were registered by genealogy in their villages. The gatekeepers had been assigned to their positions of trust by David and Samuel the seer. So this is First Chronicles. So this is chronicling all the way back to when David first put those gatekeepers in. And so it says they were entrusted with the responsibility for the rooms and treasuries in the house of God. They would spend the night stationed around the house of God because they had to guard it. Others were assigned to take care of the furnishings. So what we find about these gatekeepers is, I guess in some ways, they're security guards. And that sounds terrible when I say it like that. But I don't mean it. It's really not a less than job. I don't even know why I would get weird about saying it. They're in charge of taking care of things. They're in charge of making sure that nobody comes in and steals anything. Nobody comes in and breaks anything. Nobody comes in and does the wrong thing in the temple of the Lord. By the way, it's because the temple was the most important place to be. This was the home of the Lord. So the gatekeepers were there to protect the home of the Lord from anyone that would come in and do anything to it. So they had a job. Now the gatekeepers that we had here, there were 172 of them. So the numbers were pretty light. And it said, the rest of the Israelites with the priests and Levites were all in the towns of Judah, each on their ancestral property. So some servants lived in the hills, some lived in Jerusalem. So it starts really naming some of the places that they go to. And it said, so they were living all the way from Beersheba to the valley of Hinnom. So they were starting to spread out again. There weren't as many as there were before. When they came in, and even 100 years later, when they came in and they sort of were like building all this stuff back up again, and then 100 years later, the nation was not that large at this point. And so they were spreading themselves out kind of all over, and we didn't have a lot of people there. And they were going to eventually multiply, but we still had a lot of people that were out of nation. And then it moves on to the history of the priests and the Levites. These were the priests and Levites who returned with Zerubbabel. So it just shows all the lists that returned 100 years before this. And then it has next the leaders that were there. So in the days of Jehoiakim, these were the heads of the priestly families. Sariah's family, Jeremiah's, Ezra's, Amariah's, Malach's. So they list a name. And again, I want to go back. That Joshua was the next generation the generation that came in. And now we're in at least 1 to 2 generations after that. We see a lot of these names repeating themselves. And again, I want to note that there is a possibility that it could be their children. The family heads of the Levites in the days of Eliashib, Joiada, Johanan, and Jaddua, as well as those of the priests, were recorded in the reign of Darius the Persian. So this is them going back. And then it moves on to say, they served in the days of Jehoiakim, son of Joshua, the son of Jozadak, and in the days of Nehemiah the governor, and of Ezra the priest, the teacher, and the law. This spans a long time. The way they're writing it seems like it's short, seems like it's only maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It's about 100 years, give or take, right? So some of them were living after it. So they're kind of giving you multiple generations of names. They're not really just sticking with that first generation that came through. So they're letting you know, this chronicler, which is Nehemiah at the time, is really letting you know some historical information and then some things that were going on in his time when he's living there. And then, guys, it just repeats itself in Chronicles. The numbers are slightly different, which could just be that the chronicler was chronicling a slightly different area, different section, different time period, right? So the numbers were definitely slightly different. And so I want to note that, because we don't want to just pretend like that's not there. But they weren't drastically different. Like it wasn't like 25,000 versus 200. So they were just a couple hundred different. And it said all the musicians came back. And then it said all these, if we're finishing up at the end of Chronicles, all these were heads of Levite families, chiefs, as listed in their genealogy. And they lived in Jerusalem. And so that's, honestly, that's where we're ending for today. So there wasn't a whole lot of information. It was really just letting you guys know, letting the reader know from Nehemiah and from the Chronicles what happened when they came back and how they spread out and how their land was allotted to them. So now we're starting to see what does this next generation, they came in, they built up the temple, they built up the city, and now they're starting to live life. Right? So now this is sort of, they're comfortable. The Lord is with them. They don't have any enemies on any of the sides. And so now what is going to happen to them as a people as we see them go on? So as they have settled into their nation again, and as they have recognized the Lord as their Lord, what will happen to them and what are we going to see in their future? And so hopefully we're going to find out more of that tomorrow. If you guys have stuck with me, which it was short, so I hope you did, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Obviously, always comment. I want to hear what you guys have to say. And I will see you guys next time. And in the meantime, keep reading.